First of all, as is the custom where I come from, thank you for inviting me to your pulpit. And I bring you all greetings from the Methodist people of Derby. God be in my head and in my understanding. God be in my mouth and in my speaking. I've taken as my text for this afternoon one of the verses from the Gospel reading that we've just had, Luke chapter 10, verse 27, and just one part of it, because if we looked at the whole of that verse, we'd need the rest of this week. So, the lawyer says to Jesus, "Love the Lord your God with all your mind." With all your mind. Now, if you think back to the Old Testament reading, mind doesn't appear in that reading. So the difference between the Great Commandment in the Old Testament and in the New Testament is that the New Testament says you love God with your mind. Why? Well, we have to have a little Hebrew anatomy lesson at this point, because Hebrew anatomy, you thought with your heart. If you had a broken heart, you had bowel trouble, translating the Hebrew literally. So when we have the word heart, it actually means your mind. You think with your mind. Now, the Gospel's going out into a non-Hebraic culture. That had to be spelled out. So they put that in kind of brackets. You love the Lord your God with your mind. Now, what did Jesus say about this? When we were just a few chapters back in Luke chapter 7, and we have love the Lord your God. It's not Luke, it's Mark. Love the Lord your God. And then Jesus says, out of the heart proceeds everything that defiles a man. For out of the heart of man come evil thoughts, fornication, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness. We know that list very well. And Paul takes up exactly the same list when he is writing about contrasting lifestyles, and he's writing to the Galatians. And very famous list, we usually quote the second half of it, but the first half of it is very, very interesting indeed. Because Paul gives the same list, and he says these are the works of the flesh. And he gives the same list. These are things that come out of the human mind. Now, if you look at the second half of that list, that's the one that we encourage children to learn. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Very interesting when you look at the first list, or indeed if you work with children, you can get them to write the opposite of the second list. And what you have is a picture of our current lifestyle. Only it's all been rebranded. Now, there is a well-known commandment that says, thou shalt not covet. What does that do to the advertising industry? Now, it's all been rebranded. And this is the problem we face today. The things that we thought were standards are now prejudices. And we've got to face that fact. That what St. Paul describes as the works of the flesh is now absolutely fine. Fornication, impurity, licentiousness, idolatry, sorcery, all that stuff. Strife, jealousy, anger, selfishness, dissension, party spirit. That's our current lifestyle. And look at the mess we're in. Because we've all been too nice. Oh, well, Satan has a point of view, of course. You bet he does. It's very interesting that all through the scriptures, Satan is described as the great deceiver. The book of Revelation chapter 12, he's thrown down so that he can deceive people no more. But you have to be very careful in these politically correct times. You've got to be very careful how you identify people. But we must remember that our current lifestyle, as promoted with press, television, all these things that we're supposed to aspire to, is exactly what Jesus says comes out of the human mind and defiles us. Now, what is the opposite? Galatians, we have this wonderful list, the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit. And the image is a tree. And when you have an image like this, very clear, it resonates through the Bible. One of the great things about doing whole Bible studies is that it's a bit like disentangling. I do tapestry work, and just occasionally the wool gets in a bit of a mess. And you undo it by pulling a bit, you know this lady, and you find where it moves the other side of the heap, and you eventually pull it through. Now, you can do this with biblical images. You say, where's all this come from? The fruit of the Spirit. That comes from the story of the Garden of Eden, where Adam's first mistake was disobedience, but disobedience in a particular way. What sort of knowledge? What sort of knowledge? And Adam was tempted by Satan, his first appearance, because of course a snake is the symbol of wisdom. So he disguises himself. Oh, there's another wisdom. Try this way. And that's the result. So the other tree, the tree that Adam and Eve rejected, was the tree of life. Symbol of wisdom. And they chose the wrong tree. So you look at the fruits of the tree of life and you say, what are they? They are love and joy and peace and so on. Now, another of the lovely images that doesn't appear in the Bible as such, but you trace it all the way kind of around the edges, is that the anointing oil that was used for the prophets and the kings and so forth was actually oil that was expressed from the tree of life. Now, you don't want logical people saying, oh, well, no, how does that work? It's a beautiful image. You express oil from the tree of life, and when you have done that, you anoint people with that oil from the tree of life. And the result is that it changes their minds. And that is why when the high priests were anointed, they were anointed on the forehead, but they were also anointed on their eyelids, because it opened their eyes. Now, the most famous picture we have, the most famous picture of all, is Isaiah chapter 11. We all know it very well. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, a branch shall grow out of his roots. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. So the manifold Spirit, but if you look at that Spirit-filled person, it's rather different from some of the Spirit-filled people we find nowadays who are going around and making prophecies and doing all sorts of things, which is all very good. But the first effect of the Spirit is on the human mind. The Spirit changes your mind. When you have the gift of the Spirit, you have the gift of wisdom, understanding, counsel, might, knowledge, and the fear of the Lord. That changes your mind. It changes the way you see things. If you want to change what you see, you have to change how you see it. A very old truism. And we know this is a reference to the anointing oil, because the third verse, his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. Now, that's one of those interesting places where everyone has got so used to and has come to accept a wrong translation. Because the commonest meaning for the Hebrew word underneath delight is actually perfume. His perfume shall be the fear of the Lord. Why? Because he has been anointed with the perfumed oil from the tree of life. And all these threads are woven together and they underlie these very familiar passages. So, when you have the fragrance of Christ, that's the expression Paul uses, it's the same thing, it means your mind has been changed. You think differently. You see differently. You are beginning to love the Lord with your mind. Now, we have a knowledge-based economy. Look where it's got us. What we need is a bit of wisdom. If you think of some of the great disasters of our time, and I'm not thinking particularly of Japan now, because when I was thinking of this sermon, Japan hadn't happened. If you think of some of the great environmental disasters, they're not caused by ignorance. It's very good managers who manage these messes. It's because they are managed with some different end in view. And if those people had all been loving God with their mind, we might have a very different world. Now, one of the stories I sometimes tell is the different educational background of me and my son. My son read engineering. If somebody came to him as an impecunious student, gave him a box of bits and said, "Will you make me a bomb?" he wouldn't do it, but he would know how to. If somebody came with me, that same box of bits, wouldn't be a problem. I would have no idea what to do. So how do we steward our knowledge? How do we steward our talents? How do we love God with our minds? Satan is the great deceiver. And we are having so many values rebranded. You don't still believe that, do you? All that good. When I started teaching RE many, many years ago, one of the things we did in personal and social education was something called drug abuse. Now, that same syllabus says drug use. 2 letters and a complete change of attitude. So, when we look at this text in Luke, or indeed in Mark and in Matthew, it's in all of them, love the Lord your God with heart and soul and mind and strength. Loving God with your mind is the most difficult thing. And that is why in Jewish angelology, Satan is in charge of corrupting the human mind. The Jews in the time of Jesus had a system of patron saints, if you like. And certain angels were in charge of certain things. And the chief of the fallen angels was in charge of corrupting the human mind. And the greatest triumph he has is when people say, he doesn't exist. That's wonderful. Great triumph. So, think about it. What does it mean? Love God with your mind.